What is happening, baby? Welcome to the studio. I'm so excited to bring y'all the Huddle Chat Sports Fantasy Football Huddle, brand new, to start the new season, the new year of football in the new studio. It's feeling great down here, and there's gonna be some heat coming out of this basement. So before we get started, as always, I'd like to introduce you to myself, your host. Indo is my Nindo, also known as Dallas Clark. And as I mentioned before, we are here on the Fantasy Football Huddle, presented by the Huddle Chat Sports Show. I'm doing all the work, I'm doing all the research, so that way you don't have to. You can just sit back and look like a genius when it comes to those other idiots in your fantasy football leagues. Now, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about those top 10 running backs. We're going to be moving on to the top 20 in the next video, and then doing the same thing with the wide receivers, and then moving on to the tight ends and the quarterbacks. Unfortunately, nobody really cares about those guys, so then we're going to save those for last. But the most important position in fantasy football is going to be the running back position, so we're going to start off with that. Now, before we get started, I'd like to ask you, if you're new to the channel, make sure you put some D in that subscribe button. We're going to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notifications bell so that you always get the news as soon as it comes out and available to you. Like I said, we're trying to take that step up on those idiots in your fantasy football leagues this year. So also, if you don't hate the video, please hit the like button. It also helps me out so much more than you even realize. And before we get started, I'd like to officially announce the partnership between the Huddle Chat Sports Show and Danklyfe Clothing brand. Danklyfe is going to be putting together some really amazing clothing coming out here, and they are going to be the people that are responsible. My girl Knowledge is the one that is responsible for these new logos that you see here, and they got the channel looking beautiful, and they're going to have me looking right here soon. Thank you so much, my girl. More to come soon on that Danklyfe promotion, but let's get kicked off into these top 10 running backs in fantasy football, and we're talking about half-point PPR. I feel like it's a great middle ground between standard scoring and full-point PPR. I do a lot of my leagues on that half-point PPR, so we're going to be speaking about these players in the half-point PPR stance. So now let's get it kicked off. Before we start, as always, I'd like to invite you to smoke them if you got them. If you don't, there's no peer pressure at all. But if you do, let's spark them up and let's get right into the news, baby. Now, putting together the top 10 running backs in fantasy football this season, that shit's hard, bro. I'm not going to lie to you. It took me a little bit. It took me a lot of research. I put them together, and then I had to go through my list and really give it some serious thought, and I made a lot of changes. But we're going to start off with the clear and obvious running back one, the man, the myth, the legend, Jonathan Taylor, the second fastest player in the NFL at the current moment behind Tyreek Hill. But hopefully this year he takes that fastest man on the planet crown. But Jonathan Taylor is going to be the clear and obvious RB1 right now. He's the workhorse down in Indianapolis. He's got a great offensive line. Matt Ryan will bring more efficiency and a better offense to the Indianapolis Colts. A lot of people have been Matt Ryan haters, and I was one of those people in these last few years. Wouldn't even draft him and pick him up out of the waiver wire in an emergency situation. I'm not saying that Matt Ryan is going to be a starting quarterback for your fantasy football team this year, but he definitely will be serviceable as a backup quarterback. You do look at the fact that Matt Ryan has been better than Carson Wentz in the efficiency standpoint in every season since Carson Wentz came into the league. More efficiency means longer drives. It means better game scripts, and it gives Jonathan Taylor more red zone opportunities than he already has. Jonathan Taylor last season led the league in goal line carries. He had 40 more goal line carries than the number 2 running back in that standpoint, and that's Austin Ekeler. He absolutely dominated the field in red zone carries. He's also a great contributor into the pass game. I do think Nyheim Hines is going to be a sneaky sleeper. He's also great in the pass game, but Jonathan Taylor, he does it all that you need from your running back. You're looking at his over-under right now in Vegas. It's going to be over 1,400 yards at the current moment. I think he can easily hit that 1,400 yards. And you look at the fact that his touchdown production is going to be easier for him this season under Matt Ryan. So Jonathan Taylor is obviously the number one running back. Now, number two, number three is where it gets a little bit cloudy. But me personally, I've got Christian McCaffrey going number two in my rankings. Now, I get it. Trust me. I understand. He hurt you last year. He's hurt you in the past. But honestly, I'm ready. I'm willing to get hurt again. Christian McCaffrey is elite when it comes to football and when it comes to fantasy football. You're looking at the fact that he's not 26, 27 years old. He's 25. This isn't a lingering issue that's going to be affecting him for his entire career, like what we had with Todd Gurley and his knee arthritis. It's going to. He missed some time last year. He's missed 70% of his games over the last two seasons, and that gives you cause to pause. However, you do look at the fact that since 2018, he's been averaging 25.5 fantasy points per game and a half-point PPR standpoint. I mean, if we were talking about full-point PPR, it's looking probably about 28, 29 points. We're looking at 25.5 points per game. That's 35% more than any other running back over that same span. Now, you do also look at entering 2019 after his number one fantasy overall output that year. You remember that MVP in fantasy season that he had in 2018. Entering 2019, when you look back at it, when you looked back at his season in 2018, Christian McCaffrey, if you took all of his rushing stats away in 2018, put up wide receiver 17 receiving stats. If he had no running stats whatsoever, he was still a wide receiver 2 in that standpoint. You look at the fact that if he's healthy for 13 to 14 games even, you're getting elite fantasy production all 14 games. Last season, he played 7 games. Of those 7 games, 4 of them, he took more than 50% of the snaps. So that gives us a kind of a good small sample size there. Of those 4 games, he put up 21.5 points per game and a half-point PPR standpoint, which was top 5 running back in all 4 of those weeks. When Christian McCaffrey's on the field and he's healthy, he's a game breaker. He will blow the hinges off of fantasy football. You just have to keep the hope that he's going to be healthy. And I do believe that after the time that he's been able to spend after a full offseason, after a full training camp, Christian McCaffrey should be coming in healthy. I'm not really expecting him to have more injury issues. So I got Christian McCaffrey all the way up at number 2. Now, number 3 is going to be the king, Derrick Henry. Now, you're looking at the fact Derrick Henry is just a monster. I mean, you look at the volume that he receives out there in Tennessee. They give him at least 25 carries a game. You're looking at him getting 30-plus carries a game in over 50% of the games that he plays. The volume that Derrick Henry gets it's just outrageous. Now, you do look at his foot injury, combine it with his age, and it does give you cause to pause on drafting Derrick Henry, which is why he's down at number 3. But you look at how good he was before that injury. Like I said, they were running Derrick Henry. I mean, they would be up 21 points, and you'd be like, why is Derrick Henry still in the game? Oh, there he goes on an 80-yard screen pass touchdown. Derrick Henry is a game breaker, especially when it comes to fantasy football. And going into the season, the Tennessee Titans have even less potential than they did last year. It's clear and obvious that their whole offensive plan this year is going to be to run Derrick Henry into a goddamn grave. Derrick Henry may not even live through this season. Like I said, that's what gives you the cause to pause on Derrick Henry. But Derrick Henry is a monster. He is the projected rushing yard leader in the NFL this season, and he can easily find his way into RB1 in fantasy if he remains healthy. Now, moving on down to number 4 on the list, I'm looking at Austin Ekeler at the Los Angeles Chargers. I've seen a lot of craziness where Austin Ekeler is going as number 2 running back. A lot of people are taking him as number 2 overall in their drafts. And that's, to me, seems a little bit too much like chasing last year's production and not following trends. Austin Ekeler did put up 12 touchdowns on the ground last season, and I don't really see that happening. He may be able to get about 8, and that's my projection for Austin Ekeler in rushing touchdown standpoint. I don't think you can chase that same touchdown volume. He is in a good offense, good offensive line, great game scripts that allow him a lot of scoring opportunity. But Austin Ekeler, people aren't really considering the fact that Isaiah Spiller is really going to eat into Austin Ekeler's production a lot overall this season. Out in Los Angeles, they don't want Austin Ekeler taking 350 plus carries a game. They want a bigger running back, which Isaiah Spiller at 220 pounds, he is that bigger running back that can take some of those goal line carries. And he's also a really good catcher out of the backfield as well. So I see him eating into Austin Ekeler's production this year. But like I said, I can't chase that touchdown volume, that touchdown production from Austin Ekeler. Over his entire career, he scored 8 touchdowns twice, which, like I said, he can hit that 8 touchdowns. But over the last 4 seasons combined, he hit 9 touchdowns on the ground. Last year, he had 12. It's just hard to chase that production. But Austin Ekeler, I do see him being a serviceable mid to low end RB1. I just can't be putting him above Christian McCaffrey or Derrick Henry. That is just absolute ludicrous. Now, moving on to the halfway point of this top 10, I got Najee Harris from the Pittsburgh Steelers up at number 5. Pittsburgh did improve their run blocking, but they did get worse overall on the offensive side, losing their veteran quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, losing some of their wide receiver options. It's just Deontay Johnson mostly out by himself now. Pat Freiermuth is a decent serviceable tight end. We're going to be going over that later. But Najee Harris did a lot of production, more out of pass catching ability last season. He actually had 94 targets last year and 74 receptions. I don't see him getting 100 targets again this year, but you've seen them in Pittsburgh kind of transfer to a Tom Brady-like offense. That dink and dunk offense where we don't do a lot of running out of the backfield, but a lot of those short dump-off passes going to the running backs that the running back can take for touchdowns, get those receiving yards and half-point and full-point PPR. You're getting those points for every catch that he gets as well. He is heavily involved in that passing game, and he does receive all of the work in Pittsburgh, all of the early down work, all of the goal line work. He is the workhorse in the backfield. He's zero competition for catches right now in Pittsburgh for Najee Harris. So I do believe Najee Harris is not really going to have a ton of upside. He's not going to give you a ton of boom weeks, but he is a very safe option, which is why I put him right there at that number 5 spot. A very safe running back with an extremely high floor that won't blow the doors off your fantasy football team, but you would love to keep him at your RB1 spot. Now, coming on in at number 6, I got Dalvin Cook from Minnesota coming in at number 6. Now, this is coming on the first or second day of the first week of contact training camp, and I did see a report that Dalvin Cook was being looked at practice day. Might have been a potential injury. So these are our early rankings. We may adjust them later on. But at the current moment, going off of what we know going into camp, I got Dalvin Cook at number 6. His upside is almost unmatched by any player in fantasy football going into this season. You look at the fact that he's similar to Christian McCaffrey. If he plays those 13 to 14 games, he's going to give you elite production in all 13 to 14 games. He has missed 3 and 4 games over the last 3 seasons. However, if you paced out his statistics that he had over those last 3 seasons throughout a 16-game span, in 2019, he would have had 1,900 yards and 15 touchdowns. In 2020, he would have had 2,200 yards and 19 total touchdowns. Last season, he would have ran for 1,900 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now, that touchdown production last year was a lot lower, and you wonder what the hell happened. Now, if you were a Dalvin Cook owner or a Minnesota Vikings fans, or you even just pay attention to that 7 hours of commercial-free football on Sundays, you would have seen Dalvin Cook get tackled on the 1-yard line many times. Now, if you don't remember, that's okay. That's what I'm here for. Dalvin Cook was tackled inside the 2-yard line last season 9 times. That's just unlucky on his touchdown production. I don't really see that happening again for him. Dalvin Cook is one of those running backs. He's one of the most pure running backs in the league. Dalvin Cook is going to be able to bring up his touchdown production more to his normal standpoint. And if he can play those 13 to 14 games, like I said, he's going to give you that elite production over all of those games. Now, moving on to number 7, I don't want to take him this high necessarily, but I feel like you have to grab Joe Mixon here at the number 7 spot in the running back standpoint. His offense is just so good. He gets so many goal line carries, tons of early down work. However, a couple of things give me cause to pause with Joe Mixon. Samaje Perine and Chris Evans play entirely too much in the offensive game plan for me to rank him a top 5 running back. And also, I see that in that great offense, that great offensive production that he gets, he does have a potential to hit a floor of about 10 touchdowns this year. That's my prediction for him, is 10 touchdowns. Maybe not quite as high as he had last season, but 10 rushing touchdowns easily for Joe Mixon. But he's not a big contributor in the pass game. And if you know me in fantasy football, that's one of the biggest things that we want. And one of our number 1 running backs is to be a contributor in the pass game. Last season, he had 48 targets, which was 27th amongst running backs. And over the past 5 years, the past half of a decade, the Cincinnati Bengals have not included him in the pass game nearly as much as you like to see. I don't see that changing coming into this season. I don't see his role changing much into the season. Joe Mixon is still going to be that high, low-end RB1, but I do not see Joe Mixon being a top 5 running back again this year. But I do see him sliding to that top 10, which is why I got him down there at number 7. Now, moving on to number 8, I got Aaron Jones from the Green Bay Packers. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. This one I feel like is going to be a fairly controversial one. Aaron Jones from the Green Bay Packers, it's hard for people to judge him with how the offense has kind of declined a little bit with losing Davante Adams and everything like that. But you look at the fact that Aaron Jones, when Davante Adams is not in the lineup, receives a minimum of 7 targets in the pass game and 55 yards receiving. When Davante Adams is not in the lineup, he instantly becomes Aaron Rodgers' favorite target. I do even think that this year he may even see like what we saw from Le'Veon Bell early in his career, or even Austin Ekeler early in his career, where he takes about 30% of his snaps lined up out wide or even in the slot and sees a lot more gameplay as a wide receiver. I see this Green Bay Packers team this year being a little bit more run heavy. And you know the NFC North, when it comes wintertime, those harsh winters in Minnesota and Chicago and Wisconsin, they run the ball a lot in those games. So Aaron Jones, I feel like, is going to see a lot of production. A.J. Dillon might eat a little bit into his production, but I see Aaron Jones flourishing this year. I do think he's a running back with a ton of upside, and I think going at number 8 is a perfect spot for Aaron Jones. Now, coming into number 9, a running back that I'm actually extremely big on, DAndre Swift. I really went in on him in my running backs that have league-winning upside video. And if you haven't seen it, I'll drop a link in the description. It'll also be at the very end of the video for you. But DAndre Swift, he's kind of going along the trajectory, unfortunately, of you can kind of pencil him in to miss 2 or 3 games. He's giving you that Alvin Cook flavor in that aspect, where he's only played 13 games in both of his first 2 seasons in his career. Now, you do look at the fact that in his rookie season, he had top 4 fantasy points per game production of all time at the running back standpoint. And last year, he was running back 8 in fantasy points per game. He has kind of proven to you that he is going to be a consistently high scoring running back that will give you a lot of boom weeks, but he may have a lot of bust weeks and may miss a couple of weeks altogether. Now, DAndre Swift did get lots of goal line work last year, and I do believe it was large in part to the fact that the Detroit Lions were honestly a lot better than people expected last season. And I think the Detroit Lions are a lot better of a team than people give them credit for. You look at the fact that the offense has, if you don't think it's gotten better, it definitely hasn't gotten worse since last season. So I see DAndre Swift continuing to get that high touchdown volume production, that high carrying production, that high early down work. And I really see this year being as the year that DAndre Swift might take off as a household name, as a top 5 running back, but I have to see it to believe it. But going late in the round, if you're one of those people that weren't fortunate enough to snag one of those early running backs or early wide receivers, DAndre Swift can easily be your RB1 or even your RB2, depending on how your draft comes down the pipe. I love DAndre Swift here at that number 9 position. Now, to cap this off, I got the number 10 spot filled by Nicholas Chubb coming out of Cleveland. I mean, he's been a consistently great, consistently low-end RB1 running back over his entire career, and I don't think anything is going to change for him. I think the fact that Deshaun Watson missing the first 6 games this season is actually going to help him. They're going to have to go with a little bit more of a run-heavy approach in those first couple weeks, and when Deshaun Watson returns, that offense is going to be actually really good, which may even increase his production as a running back even more, which is what I think is going to happen for Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is not really involved in the passing game too much. He does average 1.6 targets per game. However, he does average 5 yards per carry throughout his entire career. Like I said, he doesn't catch a lot of passes, but Nick Chubb is maybe one of the purest runners of a football on this planet. He's good at scoring touchdowns, but he's really not that great. He doesn't pop off those like insanely high touchdown production years that somebody like Ezekiel Elliott or Adrian Peterson that doesn't catch a lot of passes would need to do to be a number one running back, a top running back. But he has scored 8 rushing touchdowns in 3 of his 4 seasons in the NFL. Like I said, they will be run heavy early and may even only get better down the pipe when Deshaun Watson comes back. Nick Chubb is going to be, as he has been in his career, consistently great and consistently a low-end RB1 with extreme upside. Nick Chubb is going to cap off that top 10 list for me. And like I said, that was extremely hard to build. Let me know if you have any problems with my list. Let me know where you would put a certain player. Let me know if there's somebody that's not in this top 10 that you are mad at me about. Come yell at me. Let me know what's going on in the comments. If you made it all this way and you haven't liked the video, make sure you like it. What are you doing at this point? And put some D on that subscribe button down here. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that notifications bell. Help me help you. Help me help you hoist that championship this year and stop bullshitting with those other freaking idiots in your fantasy football league. But let me calm down. Let me stop yelling at y'all. It's getting late. So your boy, as always, Dallas Clark, also known as Endo as Monendo, is going to get the fuck up out of here, y'all. You have a great one, and remember to never be outworked, never be out-hustled, and never be outperformed. I love y'all, man. Peace.